Typically, many of us think air travel is by far the safest mode of transportation, but it has not always been this safe. There have been a number of major air crashes and accidents involving commercial flights. As flight travel expanded and the carrying capacity of flight increased, so too did the casualties from accident. Let's talk about this and more only in today's video.
Hey everyone, what's up? And welcome to the amazing top 10. I'm your host Angel Ayay, and today we are looking at 10 worst air travel in the history. This aviation disaster were caused by mechanical failure or human error and climatic conditions.
Starting with the countdown, we have China Airlines Flight 140 in 1994. China Airlines Flight 140 regularly flew between Taipei's Chiang Kai-shek International Airport in Taiwan and Nagoya Airport in Japan. Unfortunately, the flight on 26th of April turned out to be anything but routine when the first officer on board inadvertently activated the toga or the takeoff and go around button shortly before the Airbus A300 622R was to land at Nagoya. This button changes the throttle position to that required for takeoffs and go around. The pilots tried to correct the situation, but the autopilot thwarted their effort as it's supposed to during toga activation. The plane pitches sharply and decreasing airspeed resulted in a stall. The plane subsequently crashed, killing 264 of the 271 people aboard. It remains the worst aviation accident for China Airlines and the second worst on Japan soil.
Number 9. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 in 2014.
The disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370 gripped the headlights and imagination of many in 2014 as the aircraft mysteriously disappeared on 8th of March. The flight was en route to Beijing from Kuala Lumpur when an air traffic control lost all contact without any warning or indication of any problem. Despite extensive searches as being conducted by various nations across the southern Indian Ocean, no trace of the aircraft was recovered until a flaperon turned up on in Reunion Island, a distance of 3,700 km from the main search site in July 2015. Search operations were the most extensive and expensive, with more than $500,000 having been spent on the effort within a few months. According to the expert, the flight changed course of unknown reason and probably continued its flight until it ran out of fuel. All 239 people on board are presumed to have lost their lives in the disaster.
Number 8. America Airlines Flight 587 in 2001.
The crash of American Airlines Flight 587 is the second worst aviation accident to take place in the United States. The flight routinely flew between John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York and Las Americas International Airport in Dominican Republic. Barely a couple of months after the 9/11 attacks, the flight crashed soon after takeoff, arousing suspicions of terrorism. In investigation, it revealed that the disaster occurred as a result of pilot error. The rudder was overused as a response to wake turbulence generated by the flight that departed shortly before. As a result of rudder overuse, the vertical stabilizer detached from the aircraft and the engines also separated shortly before it fell to the ground. The plane crashed into a neighborhood in Queens, New York, killing all 260 people on board and 5 on the ground.
Number 7. Air India Express Flight 812 in 2010.
The Air India Express Flight 812 is the third deadliest aviation accident to occur on Indian soil. The aircraft was headed to Mangalore from Dubai. Mangalore Airport is just one of the 3 airports in the country with tabletop runways, which means that the length of the runway is limited because of hilly terrain with a sudden drop or gorge at one end. Navigating a landing requires great precision and heightened awareness. Unfortunately, in this case, the aircraft's pilot miscalculated the landing and landed beyond the usual touchdown point while making several errors. As a result, the aircraft hurriedly passed runway and fell over the cliff, causing the plane to disintegrate and catch fire. The accident took the precious lives of 158 individuals on board, with just 8 survivors.
Number 6. Air India Flight 855 in 1978.
On New Year's Day in 1978, Air India Flight 855 departed for Dubai from Santa Cruz Airport in Mumbai. The 747 being used for the flight was in fact the first of its kind procedure by Air India in 1971. Tragically, the flight did not get very far and crashed into the Arabian Sea, just off the coast Mumbai within minutes of takeoff. The disaster occurred as a result of equipment malfunction and failure of the crew to respond appropriately as a result of spatial disorientation and their inability to check AI instrument readings with the actual horizon because of darkness over the sea. All 213 people on board perished in what is the second worst aviation accident in Indian territory.
Number 5. American Airlines Flight 191 in 1979.
The American Airlines Flight 191 crash remains the worst airline accident within the United States, and it also brought disrepute to the McDonnell Douglas. Disaster struck just moments after takeoff as one of the engines from the left wing of the plane separated from the aircraft, flipping over the top of the wing. This caused significant damage, and it also resulted in severing hydraulic fluid lines. The aircraft instantly went into a roll, turned over, and plummeted into a nearby field. Under investigation, it revealed that the disaster was caused by faulty maintenance procedures followed by the aircraft personnel, claiming the lives of all 273 people on board as well as 2 on the ground.
Number 4. Turkish Airlines Flight 981 in 1974.
Turkish Airlines Flight 981 crashed outside of Paris because of a design flaw and the failure of Moroccan baggage handlers to properly read and understand instructions provided to them in both English and Turkish language. As a result, the latch of the rear cargo hatch blew open mid-flight. This caused rapid decompression and severed cables that left the pilot with no control over the aircraft, claiming the lives of all 346 souls on board.
Now we are down to our top 3. Charkhi Dadri mid-air collision in 1996.
Charkhi Dadri is a small village to the west of New Delhi that will become infamous because of a disaster over its skies. The mid-air collision between Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763 and Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907 remains the worst disaster of its kind to date. The collision occurred soon after the Saudi flight took off from New Delhi while the Kazakhstan flight was readying for its arrival. As a result of poor English communication skill on the part of Kazakhstan pilots and the absence of secondary surveillance radar at Indira Gandhi International Airport, the flight's path crossed and the pilots were unable to avert a collision. All 349 people on board flights perished in the disaster.
Number 2. Japan Airlines Flight 123 in 1985.
The crash of Japan Airlines Flight 123 remains the worst air accident involving a single aircraft to date. The Boeing 747 was carrying 524 passengers, including crew, when it crashed into mountain terrain at Mountain Takagamahara, northwest of Tokyo. The flight, which departed from Tokyo's Haneda Airport, was en route to Osaka. Just 12 minutes into the flight, which is unthinkable happened, the aircraft suffered explosively decompression. This resulted in loss of the rudder and hydraulic system, effectively crippling the pilot's control over the aircraft. Despite this, the crew managed to keep the plane airborne for another half an hour, but it finally crashed into a ridge, killing 520 passengers, leaving just 4 survivors.
And lastly, our top 1 is the Tenerife Airport disaster in 1977.
What was to be one of the worst disasters in aviation history occurred as a result of a series of unfortunate events, starting with an explosion at Gran Canaria Airport in Spain. This resulted in a number of flights being diverted to Tenerife Airport, including the ill-fated KLM Flight 4805 and the Pan Am Flight 1736. As a result of dense fog, the absence of a ground radar, and miscommunication, the 2 Boeing 747 collided with each other on the ground, claiming the lives of all 583 passengers on board in both the flights, of which only 61 passengers from Pan Am flight survived.
What is important to note in this video is that each disaster ushered in new developments and standardization in aviation safety and technology, make it the safest mode of travel today. Ciao, adios, and thank you for watching.